Back here at home, Eskom and blackouts will be on the agenda today in Parliament. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to respond to written questions from MPs. EFF leader Julius Malema has submitted 2 questions related to the power utility. He wants the president to reveal if he knows what caused the power cuts that forced him to cut his international trip short, and whether Ramaphosa has considered removing the CEO. Let's discuss this further now with political analyst Lukhona Mnguni, who joins us now live for what he would actually expect. He is also the anchor of On the Spot, live for you every Sunday at 12 noon. Lukhona, today at least in Parliament we'll be discussing what many South Africans want to know: what's happening with the power crisis. Why are we experiencing load shedding every single day now?
Well, yes, Maseko, I think it's important that we get a sense that, our public representatives are grappling with the issues. I'm just not so sure if the questions are well structured, given the number of interventions that have been put on Eskom over the last 5 years. I think one of the things that Parliament needs to demand from the President is a release of some of the documents that you would expect he has gotten from some of the panels that he had appointed. The Chief Reconfiguration Officer, for example, Freeman Nomvalo, must have submitted a report, because we actually do need to start synthesizing some of the recommendations that have been given to the President and hold the President accountable as to how well are they in government, working in close collaboration with the board at Eskom and, of course, with the executive, delivering on the demands of those recommendations. And lastly, Maseko, we continue to hear a serious problem of no transparency around the maintenance contracts at Eskom. So it's one thing for us to experience load shedding, but when we are looking for solutions, I think transparency is also going to be at the heart of it. We need to know who's maintaining that fleet at Eskom, who has the contract, at what value, are we getting value for money, and all of those things, so that there is a full conversation we can have as a society about this problem. And also to understand, because they want us to understand when there's load shedding, so that we understand how long we might be with this crisis for.
And Lukhona, you talk about the framing of the questions and whether or not it's right. I think maybe fatigue has set in now about talking about the same thing over and over again, diagnosing ourselves, knowing exactly what the problem is, the president being able to tell us where our problems are. But in terms of solutions, we're always expected, like you say, to just understand.
No, absolutely. And understanding is no longer a solution, I'm afraid. You will know that the Deputy President has appeared before Parliament as well, whether at the NCOP or National Assembly, to answer some questions around Eskom, because he was tasked to chair the inter-ministerial task team that was looking at this issue. And we need to start understanding and locate the problem. So if there are so many interventions, where is it failing? Is it failure to give political leadership? Of course, there is failure to give political leadership, Maseko, because the board was allowed to deplete in terms of numbers for such a long time without any kind of effort being placed to ensure that there's a viable board at Eskom, to ensure that there is a board with a clear directive and mandate, and a board that has space to do its work and account to government and to society. And I'm wondering whether or not we have that kind of board that is going to enjoy some space to try and sort out the problems at Eskom, but that's also going to, again, be accountable to Parliament, to citizens, and of course to the government as well. Because us being asked to understand the issue of load shedding is not enough. We must be made to understand the scale of the problem at Eskom. And once we understand the scale of the problem, we must be given a plan that we can then hold those who must implement to account. Because today, you and I, Maseko, don't even know what exactly are the problems at Kusile and Medupi, two of our newest power stations that are always experiencing problems. And therefore, how do you hold anybody to account as to what are the things that need to be done in those power stations in order for them to come back and be viable? Because it already tells you, if a Kusile and a Medupi, with all the hundreds of billions that have been spent there, fairly new, has a clear runway for a long life. But if it's going to cost so much to maintain and repair, maybe you might as well just close some of the units in those power stations.
Yeah, absolutely, Lukhona. They mention Kusile and Mirupi quite a bit. But also there's other questions obviously having to do with the emissions, the fact that we need to reduce our emissions according to the COP17 agreement. There's also COP22 taking place in Egypt in a couple of weeks' time, and there's questions around that and what our government's stance is. And this is going to be important. But Lukhona, with the asking of the firing of the current CEO of Eskom, one, do you think that there's going to be heckling in Parliament because of this particular issue around Andre de Ruyter and perhaps even Pravin Gordhan as part of the executive? But also, secondly, the FF Plus's question, quite left, wouldn't you say, asking about BEE. I know that the implementation of it has been a problem in most companies and in most private and government companies. But to ask that question right now, when the issue and the crisis is more about power, or am I now just making their issue a small thing when it's actually quite big?
Well, Maseko, you'd know that the FF Plus is a right-field political party. It has a clear constituency that it must represent, and that question is not surprising if you look at it that way. Of course, there's also been the Discam issue that, Discam had created some level of moratorium on the appointment of white and promotion of white people in their business so that they comply with the Employment Equity Act. So I think that is what has brought this question back to the fold for the Freedom Front Plus. And of course, it speaks directly to their constituency. Some of them, who talk about, they bastardize, I put it, in terms of saying that BE and affirmative action are reverse apartheid. And that's part of the, conversations that are happening actually where I am at the Black Management Forum Policy Conference this afternoon. And so, Maseko, that is expected, but quite correct that, the Andre de Ruyter thing has become quite contentious. I think it's also going to be very contentious in the ANC's own conference because KwaZulu-Natal has called for de Ruyter to go. They then had a meeting with Limpopo. They seem to have an understanding that they want that. But I think the president will simply say it's not his duty to hire and fire executives at Eskom. If you remember, Maseko, Matsila Koko once won at the Labour Court because when President Ramaphosa appointed the then board in 2018 as deputy president, he gave directives in terms of what should happen to certain executives, and of course that was illegal. So he will stay very far from pronouncing on de Ruyter and probably say that is best left to the board.
All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. Lukhona Mnguni, political analyst there. He is also the host of On the Spot with Lukhona Mnguni here on eNCA every Sunday at 12 noon.